and people are going to join. So I have the great pleasure to introduce Evgeniy Kharam to the New York Information Security Meetup slash the Cyber Guild. It's Thursday, July 16th, and we're recording this live straight from, close to New York City. And so, Evgeniy, first of all, let me just say that, it's been a great pleasure to reconnect again. It's been how many years?
It's been a while. I say around at least 10, 11.
Yeah, at least 10. It's amazing. You haven't changed a bit.
Same for you beside the beard.
Yeah, it's I'm joined. It's a quarantine beard,
Quarantine,
So
but yes.
so it's funny because I've been, we've been connecting on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on social media, on Twitter and so on. So I've been following your career. So you're doing amazing. You run now like a major operations, right? You're director for infrastructure security for Herjavec Group.
Yes, still with Herjavec Group, the place you actually helped me join,
Yeah.
13 years, almost 14 years ago. You took major play to helping me join Herjavec Group.
Yeah.
And right now, what I'm responsible in is working with our enterprise customers to help them with tools, with maturity. We do quite a lot of workshop for the customers. And as you probably know, by working for the vendors, people buy stuff, people forget to deploy them. They don't know how to deploy them. They forget how to integrate them. They don't use all the license.
Yeah.
And we doing a lot of workshop for customers and helping them to be more organized and streamline their roadmap, save them money, and direct them to the correct, in our mind, path of cybersecurity.
So Herjavec Group is now a very big company, big MSSP, managed service security provider, right? How many vendors have you interacted, have seen demos, or like just on a regular basis in the past, 12, 18 months?
Wow, it's as we say in the industry, a very good question. I can tell you that I have at least 2-3 vendors knocking on my door, my LinkedIn, or my mail a week. We probably, as a company, work with around 80 vendors. Probably 20 of them are the ones that have more going on. There's a lot of vendors, and there's also a lot of vendors that do similar things. And also, it's very hard to understand the difference between the vendors, how they operate. And eventually, you try to work with the vendors, you try to help them, you see how they can integrate, but it's not easy. Just as a lot of vendors. If you go on some databases, you'll see like 2,000, 3,000 vendors in the industry in general.
Yeah, you've probably been to RSA, right? Pre-COVID, March, 2020, right, when things started to get a little ugly. And it's remarkable, right? So you have all those vendors on the floor, and then you have 1,000 other vendors just participate but don't actually present. And it's mind-boggling. Obviously, well, it's great for an industry that that obviously can support such a large number of vendors. But if you're a security professional and you're mandated to start looking at solutions out there. So let's say your boss or somebody comes over to you and say, hey, this is a project I want you to fix. I wanted to fix, for example, remote access, right? Go out there and research and, come back with some recommendations and then let's go ahead and find a solution. So where do you start?
It's hard. So what I see in the industry, people doing a couple of things. They go research on the internet, they ask their friends, or they already have an idea from the companies they worked before. Majority of the people going to Gartner, going to other companies that do research, 451 research. There's quite a lot of, not a lot, maybe around 10 companies that help you with research and publication. Forrester, for example, and research there. And this is how people usually start. And this is what people do. They go to Gartner Magic Quadrant, they understand who is there. Not everything has a quadrant as well, so it's sometimes hard. And they start from there. Now, then it's dependent on their maturity and dependent on what they actually know, what they need. They will create some basic RFI, request for information, and will send it to some customers. No, sorry, not customers, vendors.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the customers, what I see, they're going to the providers, company like Herjavec Group, Bell, Optiv. There's a lot of companies that do what we do and tells them, okay, I have a problem. Can you help me? Can you help me understand? Not all people do this. Not all people trust the VARs, the value added resale, to actually help them understand it on the journey. And they're trying to fix the problem themselves. And in a lot of the cases, they end up with what we call shelfware. They buy a technology they cannot implement in the environment because of a variety of reasons. So find the company, understand what they need, understand how to integrate in their environment, understand how to implement it later on, understand the license schema. Is not an easy solution and not an easy journey.
So what do you find is the most difficult piece? Is that to narrow down the number of vendors, or is it the proof of concept that they do, or is it the buying process? What do you find is the most difficult? And then I think that what you're trying to solve, and then we'll talk about in a bit about your the security architecture podcast that you've created, kind of to address that issue, is how. So A is a selection process, how to sift through the noisy marketplace, but also how do you take that piece of software or hardware or both, and or cloud deployment, and integrate back into your existing applications, because that's also a very big key. So what do you find is the most critical piece of choosing and implementing a new technology?
So there's, I guess, two major parts. One is the technology. A second is, of course, the price. There's a lot of solutions, but companies usually have a limited budget. From what I see, the biggest problem is people going to POC, people going to find products, and instead of kind of standing, waiting, creating success criteria, understand what they want to test, they start with one. Then somebody gives them a different eye candy. They switch to another one. Then they go back, and they switch to the third one. 4 months after, they tested 3-4 different products, and they still don't know what they want. So this is the biggest problem I see from my perspective. People just don't want to stop, in some cases, create a procedure, understand how to score different vendors, understand what they can get from different vendors, and then go POC them and get the vendors they need and want, and will actually answer to the requirements they created.
Mm-hmm.
To add to this piece, with large enterprises, we see groups not going across to other groups to see maybe how this particular solution will help them as well.
I understand. So, define eye candy. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that. Is that you're referring to the, to the GUI, the controls over the product, the output?
Eye candy will be they sit in a bar, or at least they used to sit in a bar a long time ago, and they hear someone tell them that they implemented product XYZ, and it was very easy and it solved all the problems. Or the manager comes and say, oh, I just spoke with this guy from this company. Gartner loves them. It's amazing. Or if somebody else loves them, they're amazing. We should get this. Or they saw a price and it's just understand it's very cheap. It's half of the price of everything they checked before. So they jumped there to see.
So basically, they deviate from a plan or lack thereof of a plan, and then just go like they can easily be influenced by somebody that somebody says to them, or easily influenced by marketing or anything else that they come across. So you mentioned that the key element is defining the success criteria, and choosing a methodology, right, and how to select a vendor. Do you offer something like that? Is it the same for all enterprise, or do you find that it has to be modified depending on the organization type?
So as a podcast, of course not. Podcast is just for information. As a Herjavec Group, yes. Yeah. As a Herjavec Group, we help our customers quite a lot. We guide our customers what they need to do. Our trusted customers, or customers that trust us, most of the cases come to us and ask us to help. Interesting point, because if you ask a vendor, can you please help me? They will give you everything you need, but you need to realize they give you everything they need is going to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can do in some cases is ask this for multiple vendors and combine all this, and then decide what you need. Not everything you need to test or you plan to test, you actually need or going to use. It's also important. So as a Herjavec Group, we help our customers with the criteria, and it will deviate and change depend on the product. If it's endpoint security, if it's cloud security, if it's network security, or if it's the same. The way you check SIEM is a way different the way you check endpoint security.
So it sounds like a lot of work, to be honest with you.
Yes, it is a lot of work.
So, and I think that's what happens with the security professionals. They're inundated with, work that they have to do on a regular basis. And typically, correct me if I'm wrong, not very many people have the opportunity to test products full time for a living, right? To go out and purchase. A lot of times it falls in your lap as an extra add-on to your day-to-day operations. All of a sudden, you have an extra thing to do. Right?
Majority of the mid enterprises don't have enough people to go play with equipment all the time. It means that they need to do something, but they don't have the cycles to actually go and test. Large financial enterprises has dedicated teams to POC, to test, to invest, and of course they know a lot. The smaller one, the mid one, don't always have this luxury. Also, if you're busy with deployment, if you're busy with operation, you don't have the time to always look and understand what's available and what's happening. Some basic examples. Customer may go and find the technologies they need, and they will continue going looking for technology, and they will never stop to check if their current providers they already have may have this capability. Or maybe the next version of this provider will have this capability. Why? Just because they don't always know it's possible or just don't have the expertise.
Mm-hmm. Do you come, get invited to the table sometimes at the end of a selection process that went wrong? And they tell you, hey, fix this. We made a wrong decision, or we implemented the wrong product. And you come in kind of after the fact or midway to help out, or is it strictly always just from fresh start?
No, we come out in the middle and in the end. It could be cases that just doesn't work. We want to put something else. And in some cases, we just say, okay, let's stop. Let's understand what happened. Let's understand if there's a way to fix it. Mm-hmm. Because in majority of the cases, the vendor will not give you the money back. So we ideally want to understand how we can make it work. And it's if impossible to make it work, then we'll recommend a different solution or we'll recommend a different approach. And the way I like to work and act, I like the synergy between products. So I will try to understand what is this product need to do? Who will use this product? Is there a way to connect this product to different systems in your environment to provide more connectivity and better approach? So synergy.
So, I don't think people realize, people that are not exposed to this whole buying cycle understand the complexity of purchasing a large enterprise. Sometimes it takes 12 to 18 months. And
yes.
Also, what's interesting about technology moves so fast these days that by the time you implement the product, so it takes you about, it takes 6 months to budget and, define a project. And then it takes another, 12 to sometimes 18 months to select and then implement. So you're looking at a good 18, to 24 month cycle. But what happened is, if you look at the cycles of technology, look at MDM, mobile device management. The whole thing was from start to end was maybe, 24 months. So, are companies now realizing they have to move a little faster, for them to become a little agile in the buying process and not go through this whole, exercise, because by the time they buy and implement, it's almost obsolete.
Yes. And I think that's why we, in a way, lucky, because we have more and more cloud-based technologies, security or software as a service. So let's compare it to you buying a box, whatever the box, switch, router, firewall. For you, when you get the box and you want to upgrade, it usually takes 3, 4, or 5 months, depending how big you are. If you buy a service, you get this right away. This is at least my approach, and this is what I like about cloud-based technologies. So the moment the vendor has a new release, in a amount of a week or two, you may have the benefits of the features in your environment. This way, it's much easier to upgrade. You don't spend money and effort on professional services as well. And in a way, you also put the SLA back on the vendor if you're okay with this. Not everybody okay to actually depend on the vendor SLA. So it's also an important part. If you're a government, for example, you probably want to control everything.
Yeah, makes sense. And what's also interesting. So tell me a bit about your project. You created a security architecture podcast, and I've checked it. It looks amazing, and you've done such a great job, like defining the framework. You call it the manifesto, which includes 6 basic principles, which I thought was pretty brilliant. And I'm going to go through it very quickly, and maybe you can kind of talk to me about the podcast itself and why I decided to create and the goal.
First
and so
of all,
on.
I have to give credit to my partner Dimitri. He the one that created the manifesto and pushed. He's like, okay, you're right. We need to include it as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's well thought of. So vendors are only allowed to share publicly available information. No future features are allowed. Experienced co-host team will be preparing questions will combine your feedback and domain knowledge. All vendors, the same technology space, will have to address the same questions, so you have a kind of level playing field. Vendors are welcome to answer the same questions and then screen share the product UI, and they're not allowed to compare solutions with their competitors. And you ask them to stay neutral, which I think is a good practice as is. And then equal starting conditions, publishing the podcast batches of 5 to 8. So you're basically looking to, provide some sort of benchmark, between vendors. You're looking at specific verticals, I guess, right? Or specific,
yes.
Security technologies. And then you create like this series of podcasts, right?
Let me explain. Yes, you're right. We basically, the idea is that we'll take an area of expertise. In this case, we take SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, term defined by Gartner. But it could be a firewall. It could be endpoint security. It could be IAM. It could be MDM. We take an idea, then we create questions around the idea. The focus is more about architecture. Then we basically go to vendors that we know in the industry. Some of them are vendors that have been around for a long time, and some vendors that are relatively young. And we ask them to be on a show. And we're going to ask them the same questions. Why? It basically gives an end user, a customer, a way to learn more about the vendors, 1. 2, we force them to answer what we want them to answer and not what they want us to tell. If you gonna create your requirement for your environment, you can get ideas from the questions we ask that you may don't think about them or just didn't think that they're actually available. And when you listen and watch the podcast, you will understand how vendors reply to these questions. And based on this, you may already understand, first of all, what you need and which vendor you want to go with because you understand what they do. We, of course, want only public information because a lot of legal issues here. And we don't want people to say why they're better than somebody else. We just want them to present how they do stuff.
Which is a good practice, right? I always say focus on your strengths, right? As opposed to somebody else's weaknesses, right?
Yes. Also, what we find out from this perspective is everybody's different. There's no like bad vendors. If people raise money and people buying them, there's something good about them. So every vendor is unique in their own way. And you as an end user will be able to understand what you like about particular vendor. What we learned in the experience in the first season, so we already recorded 8 episodes. We didn't publish them yet. We're going to publish an episode a week. That it's actually taken a lot of time to record. People want to talk. So we're going to minimize the questions for the next season. I'm going to cut the time to at least 30, 40 minutes. Right now, we have episodes that are 1 hour. It's probably too long.
You should do, like the Dragon's Den, right? But, Shark Tank for vendors. Very specific for security architecture.
When we finish our 50 episodes, we'll get to the idea, What I can tell you is that 3 months ago, I didn't know anything about podcast recording. And it was quite a journey to learn about everything. And I'm very happy where I am right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Kudos to you for the initiative. People don't realize how difficult it is and how much, how time consuming it is to, to create the content and publish and, edit and publish it. And then also getting out of your comfort zone. People don't realize it's not that easy to go out there and, talk in front of the audience and also know that your content is going to be published. um, you know, for once, you're the most critical of yourself, right? If you ever watch yourself on
Yes.
video, like I personally cannot watch myself. I find, I'm so critical. Who's the target audience, and what's your goal? Obviously to help the community, sift through the noise. But who do you think the target market is?
So the target audience right now are people that are already probably a bit more established in cybersecurity, that are looking for products, that are uh, trying to understand more about new concepts, because we're going to bring new concepts and new ideas. SASE is relatively new, or we're probably going to go with IAM and password access management for the next season. People that are in the industry, but maybe doing something else. So let's say you're a security engineer in endpoint, and you want to learn a different area. So it's going to be a good podcast for you. We're probably not very good right now for people that are just starting with cybersecurity, because we do use a lot of acronyms, but probably too many, and we need to figure out how we can adapt our content for people that are just starting.
I
What
say
we
you can do
Yeah.
like you can use the acronym and maybe have like a little subtitle where you actually explain, what
So
that is.
what we did, it's a good idea for the subtitle, but what we did is we created a glossary and dictionary on our website. They're going to be publicly kind of done, when we're going to point people to the glossary, and people going to go and check what is SASE mean, what does MDM mean. It's all on our website. And if anybody want to contribute, they can go to GitHub, sign up, and can contribute for the project.
I think you're right. It's good for everyone. The people that just starting out, it's going to be a little more of a learning curve, but that's fine. As long as they spend the time and understanding it. And I also believe that there's nothing better than learning from vendors, because they seem to be in the forefront of innovation most times. They have to be in order for them to sell. So if you want to look at the latest and the greatest in endpoint security, go look at CrowdStrike. Go look at some of the other endpoint vendors out there. If you want to know about XDR, look at some of the vendors out there. They do wonderful things and they typically are, very innovative in this space. Um, you know,
Yeah,
so go ahead.
not just this. Oh, like this is an amazingly good point. A lot of the time when you talk to such vendors, you don't realize they have content and idea and technology that you don't even know exist. So let's talk about quickly, like browser isolation. People know maybe what it is, but people don't always know how to use it. And we learned that some companies have it, or it's a roadmap on some companies. Or you can potentially block YouTube or bandwidth control on YouTube. Or you can do security on the endpoint. We're actually going to release a blog tomorrow about some of the ideas we learned from different vendors.
Yeah, and that's really also interesting point. I personally found that enterprise typically purchase because of they have one or two reasons, right? It's like hot, a few hot buttons like that they must have, and then there's a lot of like nice to have features, right? That they don't necessarily add value, but there's nice to have, and it's tough because most of the enterprise the evaluator would not tell you what those hot buttons are. And they maybe tell you since you're like the trusted advisor, but we're not going to tell the vendors because they're afraid the vendor's going to push those buttons to negotiate afterwards. So there's this vendor enterprise or vendor customer relationship that is, I think is not getting better. I think that industry maybe because of so many vendors out there, there's almost like people, the practitioners that are afraid to go to RSA. They don't want to be inundated
Yes.
by.
Also, if we take 15 years ago, when you and me met, there was firewall, endpoint security. They just came up with anti-spam,
Yeah,
and maybe IPS.
yeah.
There were like
Wireless IDS, IPS back
yes,
then
there
as
was
well.
like 5, 6, maybe 10 different technology categories. Right now, there's like 40.
Yeah.
So it's very, very easy to lose yourself and understand what you actually need. And if you go to RFP, your request for procurement for the vendor, majority of the vendor will answer yes for everything. And when you actually asking them, it may be yes, but it's going to be released next year.
Well, they have to, because they know otherwise they're going to get disqualified.
Yeah.
So they have to, in order for them to pass to the next step, and they obviously want to be successful. So they just play the system. They understood that if they ever say no, they're going to get disqualified right away.
So this is the other part of the podcast that I hope people will listen, understand, and will write notes for the particular areas. And we encourage our listeners to tell us and provide us ideas. I like your idea with putting, if you can say an acronym later on, put it in the video. We are a bit of struggling right now with video and audio, where to push ourselves, because we're talking about architectures that have to be in the video, but people a lot of the time when they used to drive used to listen to the podcasts.
Yeah, I would just publish and YouTube, like video format, and then people can just listen to it on their phone without the the video, and then if they want to, they can look. So in your opinion, obviously, and you deal with so many technologies, what's the most exciting technology like in the cyberspace that you see coming down the pipe that's really going to help? I mean, and again, the major issues that I've seen is that companies spend so much money on security. The security market is billions of dollars, but yet Twitter just got hacked today, right? So, yes. And Twitter is not, I mean, I'm sure they spend tons of money on technology. So how do you explain that? Where do we fail?
I think identity become more and more important. And even if we look, again, I come from a firewall space. If we look in the firewall space, we're slowly moving towards identity-based security. So even the firewalls are now looking who you are before you start what you're trying to do, and then adopt the policy for you. So understand who you are, what you're trying to do, glue behavior of what David or Evgeniy trying to do will probably going to be one of the major streams with the other security controls around it.
Mm-hmm. So identity is a big thing. So how, in what you're seeing, how do you define that identity? It's identity is tough to prove, right? It's typically, from what we've seen, traditionally it's been a username and password, right? That was your traditional identity, right? But then we added two-factor, but that's cumbersome, right? So you talk about behavior, right? So probably, I'm assuming you're talking about some behavioral analysis to kind of profile what you do, and I'm assuming that would be part of your behavior. But identity is a big problem, right? So what technology have you seen that solve that?
So before we go to technologies, there's two things. One is, yes, as you mentioned, behavior of what you do, but it could also be behavior of how you use your phone, or when you use your phone. That if somebody stole your phone, people will understand that they're not you. We have the traditional guys, the CyberArk, Beyond Trust, SailPoint. We have some new vendors that are doing interesting things. I don't have all the names right now, just blank for a second.
Yeah, that's okay.
But there's quite a big list of identity companies that help you with Active Directory, mm-hmm. that help you to understand. So, beside the user, we also have the Active Directory. We have the Azure, we have AWS, and we want to make sure it's everything kosher there as well. So mm-hmm. we need to make sure that privilege IDs are not hacked, are not used by somebody else. And it's a second part of identity that's very, very important.
So, I think the major problem I see, and maybe that was solved as well, is sometimes our behavior changes, right? So you're talking about behavior, right? So for example, how do you use your phone, right? Or how do you drive? So I know, for people change their behavior depending on the situation that they're in, right? So I'll give an example. You drive one way when you have the kids in the back, right? And then yes. you might be driving a different way when you don't have the kids. You might be using the phone like when you had one or two beers, you might be using your phone a little different. So how do you then define that behavioral sequence to match in all the different situations, because we have almost like split personalities sometimes.
And you're absolutely right, because for the last 3 or 4 months, our behavior completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
Because we now work from home, And if I used to do all my work from the office, I had one behavior, but now I'm working from home. I have completely different behavior, different IPs, different devices. And it's still a struggle. We have a number of companies that help us with behavior, that help us and understand. There are traditional SIM guys and pure UBA. We also have companies that analyze just the Active Directory part
So
and
define
trying to
UBA
help you.
for the
Oh,
Evgeniy
sorry.
again.
You see, user behavior analytics. And let's provide a very basic example. If David logged in from New York and David logged in from Australia 3 minutes after, something doesn't line up. Maybe it's not David. Maybe David's account got hacked.
Or I
If
just use a
Evgeny,
VPN, right?
well, could be as well. But why would you VPN go to Australia? If you're using good configuration, you should stay in New York or somewhere in US.
Maybe I'm searching the latest Australian properties because I'm looking to move, and I figured it's better using virtual private networks. I'm gonna get
Could be.
more local results, right? People do
Could
that.
be. Yeah. So there is, of course, valid ideas. Why would you do this? It could be flagged, or we can create a behavior that say, okay, if it's happened once, I'm okay. But it happens multiple times, something bad happening. Or let's say David is doing work that require him to move files from place to place. And the files David moves are usually not very, very big. So David logged in from Australia and now moving a lot of files. Why would David do this? It's not typical for him. Or maybe David worked from 9 to 5 local time, and now David logged in at 3 a.m. and moving large files. There's a lot of scenarios like this that are available, and human eye and human logic not always were able to capture this.
Mm-hmm.
But machines with machine learning, that I don't think we're still there with the machine learning and the AI part, will able to analyze this. You still need to teach and tell them what to do, and it will take quite a while to get to the point, because they will need to basically build, okay, David logged in from Australia. Here's a problem. David move a file. Here's a problem. David did this. So David risk going up, 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 and up to the point that, okay, something is bad going on. David is not doing something that he's supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. So, so you have so much experience, you really advanced your career. You've been exposed to a lot of different projects and technologies. What's your passion within the kind of the cyberspace? What makes you go and become successful? I mean, you've been working in this really fast growing company for the past 14 years, and you advance yourself in the career and your position. So what do you think is like the qualities that that you possess that require to be successful?
So my passion is help customers make them more secure, to help them actually implement whatever they buy and acquire. What helping me, I think, is I can understand the big picture from where is the customer trying to go, and I'm quite technical to the level when I can go down and understand the architecture, understand what they're trying to do. Doesn't mean I can configure all the technologies anymore, but I can understand what they're trying to do, where is it going, how the technology work together. And this way I can tell the customer what the potential is they're missing, what potential the problems they may have, or how they can integrate and help different group in the environment and save money by this and have a better, faster, and more secure architecture.
Mm-hmm. So what made you start these podcasts? Was it pre-COVID, or when COVID hit, you decided to do something extra? And and maybe you can talk about what what is meant
Definitely.
for you, like, and what changes,
Definitely. As you mentioned that being on a radio, being live, it's getting out of the comfort zone. So I've been thinking about my own podcast for probably around 2 years. I actually started a podcast in Russian in around October because I heard someone it's a good idea to do a podcast about something you really like and just do it. Don't expect anything. So I did a couple of episodes about extreme sports, about snowboarding, about mountain biking, just to kind of understand what does it mean. I had like 5 followers, like my mom and but it
Is
helped
your
me
mom?
to.
Is your mom likes extreme sport? That's what you're telling me.
Yes. Um, so it helped me to kind of be more comfortable to record, understand the nuances of the recording. And later on, I started to write about SASE and about cloud gateways. Actually, in December and January, I just started to write about this because I'm passionate about the idea and I'm passionate about where we're going with this. And then COVID hit, and everybody worked from home. I'm like, oh my God, what I was writing literally a month ago, it just makes sense. Everybody needs remote access. Everybody wants to secure them when they work from home. It's probably a good time to start the podcast. And in the same time, I have a group of people about cybersecurity on WhatsApp that we discuss ideas. And I started asking people like, guys, what do you think about the idea? He's like, yeah, sounds like a very, very good idea. And a friend of mine, Dimitri, that he's a software security engineer, decided to join me. And I created the questions. We reviewed the questions. I sent emails to some vendors. And like, oh, yeah, we love it. We would like to be on the podcast. Then David Sparks from a CISO Security podcast. Actually, sorry, I met David Sparks in Israel during the cyber tech show in a pub, and I told him about the idea. He's like, sounds like a very, very good idea. Before you do this, put a LinkedIn blog and ask people what they think. I did this, got a lot of positive reinforcement. The COVID started, and 3 months after, we had the podcast.
Mm-hmm. I love David Spark. I've done a couple of co shows with him in New York City, and it was always fabulous. He's a fabulous guy. I love what he does, and he's a huge asset for the community. So that's phenomenal. Listen, I hope that maybe we can do a live show maybe one day. Your podcast, and we do that in New York City, in front of the group, and then maybe in the meantime you can invite me over as a guest host for one of your recordings. Maybe you can do one live in front of the group. I would love to join forces and do a couple of these as well. For some very specific topic, and maybe get like a couple of vendors and do some sort of competition.
It's an idea that was in my mind to do a competition, so I need to figure out what's the best way to do it. Maybe you can join forces, we can do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see why not. So where can people find you? So I'll share the kind of the podcast URL afterwards, but where else can people find you, Evgeniy?
So the easiest way, if you type Security Architecture Podcast in Google, we're number one apparently, and good. If people want to find me,
there's more than one, so you guys are doing well.
This is define the website. Or if you want to find me on LinkedIn, Evgeniy, Evgeniy, last name Kharam, Kharam, or you can share as well. You can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. Happy to help if people want ideas what they can do in cybersecurity or how they want to progress in cybersecurity. So these are the easiest places probably to find.
Much appreciated. It's awesome to see somebody giving back to the community. We need more of that. And again, apparently there's only a few of us that share. There's I forgot the number, 7 billion impressions on a daily basis, but only like a couple of million people that actually post something. And I'm sure that number is even smaller, specifically for the cybersecurity.
But it's not easy. It's not easy to post because you don't know how LinkedIn or Facebook decide to publish you or tell you about it.
Well, hopefully they're not going to filter us too much and they're going to promote us. So it's been a real pleasure, Evgeniy, and looking forward to hopefully doing more of these soon. So and then hopefully I can see you in person. Don't be a stranger after so many years.
Sounds good, man. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, take care. Thank you guys for joining.